Welcome to Lesson 6, Painting and Retouching. In this lesson, you get a quick primer in color and color models. Then you'll have an opportunity to practice using Photoshop's painting tools, such as the painting, cloning, and healing tools. So in this video, I'm going to introduce you to many of the things that you can read about in Lesson 6 of the Digital Classroom book. But I'm going to start out with having this image open. You'll see it's a rather colorful image, and I want to explain something. Just because you can see these colors on your particular screen does not mean that they'll necessarily reproduce on someone else's screen, in a website, in a PowerPoint presentation, or especially in a printed piece. One thing to keep in mind is that there are two particular color models that people generally work in. One is RGB, or red, green, blue, and one is CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, black. And that's because typically when you send something out to a color printer, they're going to print with those four ink colors: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. If you're paying extra, they might throw in what are called spot colors or Pantone colors. Those are colors that are pre-mixed and added to the press, not created out of a combination of CMYK. Now, this particular image is rather bright, and I want to say that perhaps I'm going to print this document. To give me a more realistic idea of how this is going to print, I can take advantage of a keyboard command, Control or Command Y. And you'll notice that when I press Command or Control Y, that first of all, the image looks a little more dull, but also at the top in the tab, you see that it now has a /CMYK, but it also has RGB. Essentially, what's happening here is that I'm receiving a preview of CMYK, what it's going to print like, but I'm still staying in RGB, which is what you want to do. You want to edit your images, do all your retouching in RGB if you can, so that you can get the best results. Now, why stay in RGB? Because there are a million different kinds of CMYK you can output to. Let's say that you're creating the cover of a magazine that's on a nice clay-coated stock. That image might look really good on the cover, but let's say that you have to reuse the image and it's on newsprint. That same image could print very dark with all the shadows filled in. So you want to make sure that you've got your color settings correctly set up, and I'm going to show you that real quickly here. I'm in Photoshop and I am choosing Edit Color Settings. And you'll notice in here that I have a few choices, and the default is that Adobe sets the color setting for just general purpose. It's not quite sure where you're going. If you are going to pre-press, you're best to choose pre-press. And you'll even notice that depending upon the selection you choose, you may or may not get a different effect in your preview. Now, I want to explain one other thing. Just because you see it on the screen and you have the preview on doesn't totally mean that that's going to be accurate as well, because you could have the sun shining behind you, you could have fluorescent lights on. It just does a little bit better job than showing you the really bright colors. Now, in the color settings, if I'm going to print, I might use North American Prepress, Web, Internet. Depending upon what you use, you'll have different results. Now, I'm going to click OK to this, and I want to show you something even better. If you have the entire Creative Suite installed, you can go to Bridge. So I'm choosing Browse and Bridge. You can go to Edit, Creative Suite Color Settings. You can choose your color settings here. So if I'm doing pre-press, I can choose that here, or North American Newspaper, General Purpose, or Internet. But when I click Apply here, that gets applied across all of the Creative Suite applications, so that if I take this particular image and I drop it into Adobe Illustrator and then drop it into InDesign, I'm not going to get various different results. Now I'm going to go back into that image for another demonstration. I've got my image here, and I'm going to click on background and just sample a color. And you'll notice that the color appears in the color picker. If I click on the set foreground color, it comes up and you'll see the color appears in the pane. Now, one thing I want to make clear, these are your desaturated colors, and then you can slide out to more saturated colors. This is representing a color wheel. I can spin that wheel by grabbing these color bars but this is the center of the wheel and this is the outside area. And a lot of times I see people with the color down here in the corner and they start spinning it and they're like, why isn't my color changing? Because it's in the center. This is what I want to show you. As you scroll up, notice that exclamation point appears. The exclamation point is essentially telling me that particular color I have selected is out of gamut for the color settings that I have selected. So in other words, if I were to use this color, I may get unexpected results. If I'm going to pull this back into the gamut of colors that I can reproduce, I click on the square and it comes back. This cube is if you want to use web-safe colors, which is becoming really a non-issue. But you could click on this and then the color is matched or aligned to one of the 216 web-safe colors. If you have a color that you want to reproduce and it's just not able to be reproduced, you can click on color libraries and the closest matching Pantone color is there. And you could use that as an additional ink color on your press if you're printing it to achieve that color. Now I'm clicking back on Picker. If it's important to you to demonstrate to somebody the colors that you can accurately reproduce, you can also go under View, turn on the gamut warning directly in the color picker. And you can see the colors that just aren't going to happen based again upon your color settings. So if you had newsprint selected in your color settings, you might see more gray appearing in the color pane than if you had coated paper, which can produce color a little bit better. So I'm just going to show you some additional painting information that you need to know. I'm just going to close this image, go back to Bridge. Going to open up an image PS602. If you get a color profile message warning, just click OK. I want to show you a couple things on here. I'm taking my paintbrush, and you'll notice that I have a rather small paintbrush. And it's funny, but since the paintbrushes are based upon pixels, this paintbrush might be very large in a low-resolution image and very small in a high-resolution image. I'm going to go ahead and press the right bracket to make it a little bit larger. I'm going to sample a color. So I'm holding down my Alt or Option key, and while I'm on the paintbrush tool or any of the painting tools, my icon or cursor becomes an eyedropper. I'm going to sample this brown color, and you'll notice that I can paint with exactly that color. Option, painting with the black. Option, painting with the gray. Don't worry, I'm going to go ahead and revert this to save when I'm done. I just want to show you some things. If I want to make my brush harder or softer, I can press Shift right bracket to make it harder, Shift left bracket to make it a softer brush. If I want to change the opacity, I can just simply press the value. 3, 30% opacity. 4, 5, 45% opacity. Want to go back to 100? 0. If I want to go ahead and change my brush, I can right-click anywhere and my brushes panel comes up. You'll see some of the new bristle brushes that have been added in this panel menu. I can also access the brushes panel by going up to this little arrow, and you'll see that I can select a brush this way too. So I'm going to go ahead and press F12 to revert this file. I still have my brush selected. I'm going up to select a brush. And for this instance, I'm going to go ahead and just select any one of these bristle brushes to show you something. Notice that when I paint with a bristle brush, that not only do I get a preview of the brush over there to the left and showing how the brush is touching the paper and the effect on the brush as I drag, but I'm also getting a realistic effect in this brush. Now I'm going to change the color here, change the brush. So depending upon the brush that I select, I get a different effect. Now let's say that I want to create a border with this brush. I'm going to go ahead and press Ctrl-Z and Ctrl-Alt-Z. If you're on the Mac, you can press Command-Z and Command-Option-Z as many times as you need to in order to get back to this image, or simply press F12. A couple things I want you to notice. First of all, I've got this brush selected, and I'm just going to click once up here in the upper left-hand corner, and then hold down my Shift key and click in every other corner. You'll notice that when I do this, it automatically connects one paintbrush stroke with another. Now I'm going to change my brush and I'll choose something more like a spatter, and I want to show you something else. If I click and I hold, nothing happens. I just simply get one brush blop down on my image. If I turn on airbrush though, you'll see the enable airbrush mode button. If I click and hold now, you'll see it spreads out like it's been affected by ink constantly being pushed through an airbrush. So if you're trying to get different, more realistic looks, depending upon what you're doing, you can change your brush settings. Notice that I can change the brush modes. So if I want to change my brush, I'll choose something a little bit wider. I can change the mode to be multiply. I can option click or alt click on a color, and you'll notice that now I can paint with a different mode on the image. So hopefully you found some things you can do with the painting tools and understand a little bit more about color. There's a whole bunch more in addition to some different lessons that are located in Lesson 6 in the Photoshop Digital Classroom book.